yeah, I actually think you want to get going, because the cynical alternative is wait for everybody to get slaughtered and then we can do justice later. And one of the reasons, I don't think we talked about it in this film, is do these tribunals deter? And if you're ever going to deter anybody, you don't want to wait till all the crimes have occurred. You want to say, justice is watching, justice is coming. And we don't have great data. Does deterrence really work? I know Richard's written on this and can talk about this as well. It's very anecdotal, the data we have. It's just isolated accounts of small boy units being disbanded after they hear about the Thomas Lubanga verdict. It's proving crimes didn't occur, and that's very hard to do. But we do hope the existence of international justice will deter. There isn't that much justice currently in the world. There was a Rwanda tribunal, Sierra Leone, Cambodia. It's not global, and not everybody is a party to the International Criminal Court. So you can see why actors wouldn't be deterred. So we need more international justice, more prosecutions, so people are deterred more. But I think, yes, you want to try to get going. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over foreign fighters in Syria. I was deeply disappointed when the court said they weren't pursuing this at the moment. That's not the message you want to get out to the media. You want to say, we have jurisdiction, so this is Europeans joining. They're all from Rome Statute state parties. And by now they're probably implicated in mass atrocity situations. I mean, it's not perfect, because you take one atrocity situation and say, okay, we can't prosecute the Syrian and Iraqis and the ISIS fighters, but we can do the Europeans. So it's weird, and I've seen people blogging, oh, you shouldn't do it, but I'm like, no, you got to start somewhere. And the prosecutor should say, she's watching, she's monitoring, we need to start. And when foreign fighters return to Europe, they can prosecute them as well. So we only have kind of pockets of jurisdiction, and we want to work up to a more robust response. But you also want to project that international justice is coming, and there are some NGOs working on this. So I say you want to get involved before all the atrocities are over. Rwanda's maybe different, it happened so quickly, it's a different scenario, but other ones, you want to pursue accountability, because you don't want to be in the business of prosecuting. You want to prevent the crimes from happening in the first place. Our goal is not, international justice isn't there. We don't want to prosecute. We want the crimes not to occur. So I think we have to have a much more robust presence. I talked to someone in the State Department who's tried working on countering ISIS propaganda, and I said, do you ever talk about jurisdiction? And there are about 12 different ways that the world can have jurisdiction over their crimes. Do you ever talk about these things? And project this. And again, you can get into these debates. Are ISIS fighters rational actors? I have no idea. Would they be deterred, or would they think this is part of a great jihad and this spurs them onward? I don't know. We can only use the tools that we have at our disposal and project that justice is coming. So I agree with one of the speakers in the film that you don't wait till all the atrocities are over.
Next question.
Yeah, I don't want to tire out everybody. Glad to chat further on your question afterwards. Yeah.
And I mean, this is a very rare opportunity for this amazing group of people to come together in this audience. So we're not limited on time. We don't want to overkill it, but we don't have a time limit. So is there any other questions? Again, this is a very rare opportunity. We don't do this very often. And these conversations need to be talked about.
Thank you. Professor Cooper, right? You mentioned earlier that Germany as a nation has accepted their past and has come to terms with it. And have come a long, far way. Are there any organizations that are looking at it? What kind of practices have they done? Is it through schools, community programs? How do we bring that to Bosnia? Because we have two entities, and they each view the ICTY differently. It's a reality. And two sets of history books taught in schools. What are some ways?
I think that's a longer discussion, and obviously I can't answer that in a short moment. But I think, first of all, a lot of what's happened in Germany is the passage of time. And I think that's something that we were talking about here. The younger generation always looks at things a little differently than the older generation. The perpetrators and the actual immediate victims are going to have a much harder time really confronting the history for different reasons. Perpetrators are much more likely to deny, or people who are on the perpetrator side, it's going to be much harder for them to actually face their responsibility than their children and then their grandchildren. And the same thing for victims, where it's much more immediate. And I think it's usually the perpetrators who talk about reconciliation, not the victims. The victims have a different responses. But I think part of it is really the passage of time. Also, the Bosnian situation is a little more difficult because the Germans, to put it really bluntly, in Germany there wasn't the victims are gone. So it's not really two separate views of history in that sense. Is maybe putting it a little too bluntly, but in Bosnia you really do have the three different sort of approaches to what happened. But I think in Germany there were a lot of different mechanisms. Time, education, the pressure of the outside pressure. I think the Cold War, the fact that the outside world was looking at them. There's a lot of different mechanisms, and there's a lot of things they do actively in terms of more memorialization, reparations, of course, all of those sort of different transitional justice mechanisms. They're very different situations, but I think there are some things that are transferable. And that's a much longer conversation.
Could you pass the microphone to your left, please?
Yeah. I spoke already. Do you mind if I...
Yeah, thanks. So I thought the film was really great, and I'm here with two women that have taught me a lot about Bosnian history and are survivors of the war, and also have kindness for Serbia and for Serbians, and show kindness for all types of human beings. And during the reconciliation piece, do you think the younger generation feels that is part of their legacy, that they are supposed to bring that on and help kind of save what's left of that, I guess, I don't know what you would call patriotism, I guess, not a right word for it, but between the Croatians and the Serbians and the Bosnians, and how that all works together from a younger generation perspective.
I can just see
and who you interviewed, and did you feel that from them, that wanting, I guess?
briefly though. I mean, we didn't talk to every youthful person. We kind of honed in on the human rights activist oriented youth,
too, yeah.
And they're kind of an exception. I think that all the big groups like the UN and the outreach, they're all looking to the youth as the answer. Like, I know the Helsinki Committee for Human Rights, they're done with the older generation. They feel it's a waste of time. So they are focusing all their efforts around youth-based initiatives to seek reconciliation and more understanding. Is it working? We might need another generation before that happens. So that would just be my opinion, but feel free to chime in.
I would like to...
Go ahead. We did, actually, the younger people, we just love them. We had a couple people from YIHR and numerous people who weren't able to be shown specifically in the film. And of course and I'm speaking very generally, there's a pessimism because there's huge unemployment within Bosnia, and you still have to declare an ethnicity to be a part of the civil government, and people feel really disappointed with the fact that Dayton is still the constitution of Bosnia, and many other things. There's a lot of disappointment, but I think our takeaway from it was there was a lot of optimism and hope too. I mean, these organizations, they're on the front lines, and they're bringing groups of youth from Serbia to Pristina and back, and the transformation they see just within those few individuals that they bring to these other areas is remarkable. And I mean, the hope that they feel from that, and that's just one example, it just really gave us a lot to hope for the future. And so that was our main takeaway, is that there is a lot of hope, and that there are a lot of wonderful youthful people who are doing amazing things. And I mean, you could make a whole other movie about that, frankly. So that's the short answer, yeah.
I would like to elaborate a little bit on that, because that has been my work for the last 50 years. So that is like the second generation after the Holocaust, and the third, and the relationship between Germany and the whole saga of Germany with the survivors and succeeding generations of relating to the Holocaust. clearly there are no simple answers, but we have learned a great deal. I'm a psychologist, so I don't come only from the legal side, in a sense. So we actually just finished creating the first instrument to assess the effects of massive trauma on second and third generation. And we have collaborators in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Rwanda and in many other places, including in Armenia, because they're the fourth generation already, to do this. So if you're really interested, it's there, and you can. They have my email, and I will gladly help. And I worked in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Actually, I started working in Yugoslavia in '85. Saying to them, if you do not attend to the long-term and multi-generational effects of World War II, you're going to have the war again. Unfortunately, they heard me only after the war started again. So, but we worked across the countries with all the communities, including Berchko, including everywhere you interviewed. And a lot of it has to do not only with those who are energized enough to be activists and to feel the inner confidence to take on their societies, but of course with the suffering of many others. I'm talking about second generation and third. That is not attended to. And particularly in Bosnia-Herzegovina, also the military is not attended to. You have a lot of fathers who, whether they were victims or perpetrators, were wounded, victimized, and their children live with that too. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm sorry, I don't want to keep talking, but I just wanted to point out to you that there are other answers besides narrow justice for those issues. Okay.
Could you pass the mic to the front, please?
Yes.
This is just like question, comment. Would y'all feel that this whole process going from the Dayton Accords and then the ICTY, was there a failure to understand past history of the region? Because as someone who is I like Balkan culture, and I've read histories of each of the countries that eventually all of them link up in the Civil War Yugoslavia. There's been a lot of trouble in the past, especially because people, even though they speak the same language, they're ethnically different. Going from when the Slavs arrived in the 500s into the Ottoman invasion, that's where you start dividing the people. And then when they get kicked out in the Balkan Wars, and then Tito sort of fixes the situation, but then after he passes away, Milosevic antagonizes, and then because when I read Noel Malcolm's book, Bosnia's Short History, he mentions there the criticisms that he thought about the international community and misunderstanding the history of the area, because he thought that the ICTY and the international community wanted to only fix the problems, but without looking in deeper, seeing that there's been history between Serbs, Croats, Bosnians.
That's a hard one. I haven't read the book. Obviously, these are not quick fixes. It's going one high school to one high school at a time, and exchange programs, and their deep histories. I don't see the ICTY. I mean, if you read the judgments, they have. I think they do go back at least, covering the events in the 90s. I don't think they're operating in a vacuum. You mentioned the Dayton Accords, and they're often described in Bosnia as kind of a double-edged sword. So Dayton solves certain things, and it leaves a legacy of other problems. So everyone has good and bad things to say about Dayton, and it's a very mixed legacy. It ended the war, and it's created a very unhappy kind of peace at the moment. So it's a complex situation. Did you want to?
Well, just to say, I remember very clearly in the early 90s that, and there was a book that I read that I liked a lot called Balkan Ghosts. That created the impression on the part of a number of U.S. policymakers that what was going on at the outset of the armed conflict there was just a repetition of what happened, from 1389 on. And you just had this deep-rooted hatred among different nationalities or ethnicities, and it had been going on forever, and it will continue to go on forever. So really, what can we do about it? And I think that attitude on the part, at least of the U.S. policy-making apparatus, was an obstacle to the U.S. becoming more proactively involved. So, I think the deep historical knowledge cuts both ways as well, because it was used very politically for years to keep the United States on the sidelines, exactly because of that kind of analysis. We can't do anything about it. This has been going on forever. So
I would
I think also a comment about.
I'm sorry. 5 minutes. They're giving us 5 minutes. We have to, because there's multiple crowds coming in. It's going to be chaos.
We're good.
So 5 minutes, please.
I guess I just wanted to say every conflict has its history, right? Every conflict has some sort of deep history. What we're trying to do with justice, with transitional justice, with all these mechanisms is to stop the conflict, to find a way to make them stop, whatever their history is. So.
Okay, did you have another comment? Okay, quickly, please.
We have to. I think I do also believe in the future, because this generation that's been growing up so far, they've been speaking amongst each other, and now they're friends. Like, for instance, my Croatian friend likes Serbian music, and my Serbian friend who hangs out with Bosnians. So there's hope.
Well, we just really wanted to say, and you can comment after this, thank you for coming. This started as a thesis project because we figured no one wanted to read a 100-page paper, although we have that too. I don't really want to read it. We can send it to you. But we didn't have an agenda when we started this movie. We really were just trying to explore the legacy, and it started to take shape. And we love the Balkans. We really love the people, the food, everything. And we know that you have many things to do with your time, and you're here with us, and you watched our film, and you may love it, you may hate it, but you came, and we really, really appreciate that. We made this with 4 people. It was me and June, our lovely film editor Stephen Burgess, and our cameraman Ian Holden. He was amazing. We took him all around the Balkans and to DC and London, and just thank you. We really appreciate it.
I guess we have one more tiny question.
I'll ask the second question. What do you think that there could be potentially another conflict in that region? I'm just curious as to what you think about that. Honestly.
That would be, as actually some people had stated in the film, Sir Geoffrey Nice had commented that you really can't tell what's going to happen. As far as they can see, there's nothing happening or brewing right now. You have the EU, that's kind of like an impetus to kind of keep peace, and economic policies that are keeping people from actually, going in that direction. And you have some like the former journalists that lived through the wars. Most of those that we interviewed don't see the peace. They see it could happen. Like a lot of them, but they're not people from the region. These are people who came in during the wars who are now stepping back. As far as the people in the region, I didn't hear anyone actually saying that. So I think it's, there's some fear, but I don't think it's a reality at this moment.
I'll just add that I think Serbia and Croatia are so fixated on EU membership and economic success, and I think that holds the whatever lingering political hatred somewhat in line for those reasons. Bosnia is different because I don't see that as a functional state, and I see the two entities hating each other, or the three parts. And there I have less optimism, and you do hear people saying, we could so easily fall into war again, all the hatreds. And it's more in Bosnia that you feel it coming out. And I just feel like Croatia and Serbia, we're moving on, we're going to be economically successful. And you don't have that sense of optimism in Bosnia, and it's high unemployment and just not a functional state, swollen bureaucracies, and it sentiments boiled over with the papers that couldn't come for the baby that needed to go to Switzerland for medical treatment. And then there were protests, and you can see there's still a lot of frustration and anger. So I think that's the more potentially difficult scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Picture of you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sitting or standing?
Either one. Sure, us in front of that.
Oh, sure, whatever you want. I'm here for you, my friend.
I just had a question for you
Sure.
too. Sure. If I could on the side.
Yeah.